Every camera in the world is pointed at 3 American warships. Every analyst is tracking laser weapons and Iranian missile batteries. Every headline is screaming about superpowers flexing in the Strait of Hormuz. Nobody is talking about the 10 million people living underneath all of it. You are watching Verified Bulletin, and today we are going somewhere the cameras are not going. Picture this. You wake up on Monday morning. Your child has school. You need to get to work. Your phone buzzes. Missile alert. Shelter immediately. You grab your kids. You hear the boom of interceptors overhead. Then you find out hours later that your country absorbed 12 ballistic missiles, 3 cruise missiles, and 4 drone attacks in one single morning. Again. You also find out the world barely noticed because America and Iran were dominating every front page. That morning was May 7th, and that country was the United Arab Emirates. Since February 28, 2026, the UAE has intercepted over 537 ballistic missiles, more than 2,256 drones, and 26 cruise missiles fired directly from Iran. Let that sit for a second. Those are not near misses over open water. Those are weapons targeted at cities, oil terminals, airports, and residential neighborhoods where families live. 13 people have been killed, 224 have been injured, and right now, as of this week, UAE schools switched back to remote learning because parents were too afraid to send their children outside. Commercial planes bound for Dubai International Airport, one of the busiest airports on Earth, turned around mid-air when the missile sirens went off again. This is not a background story. This is the story. Before we go deeper, one quick thing. If you are new here, Verified Bulletin is where you get verified, sourced analysis on the events shaping our world. Hit subscribe right now. We are building something real here, and you do not want to miss what is coming in this conflict over the next 72 hours. The window is narrow and the stakes are enormous. Stay with me. Now, back to what actually happened on May 7th, 2026, and why the UAE angle changes everything about how you should understand it. America launched what it called Project Freedom, a naval operation to break Iran's grip on the Strait of Hormuz. 3 guided missile destroyers, the USS Truxtun, the USS Mason, and a third vessel, were dispatched to transit the strait. Iran responded with what military analysts are describing as its most coordinated attack of the entire conflict. Fast attack boats closing from multiple directions, drone swarms launched from the northern coastline, cruise missiles and ballistic missiles fired from shore-based launch sites simultaneously. A full saturation assault designed to overwhelm every defensive layer those ships had. 0 hits. None. Not a scratch on any American vessel. Iran's 4 key coastal facilities, Bandar Abbas, Keshem Island, Minab, and Bandar-e-Kamir, were struck in precision retaliatory raids. Port infrastructure that took Iran a decade and billions of dollars to build was burning by dawn. President Trump posted about it on Truth Social with a very specific phrase, "A nice little love tap." He then said, Iran should be very motivated to get a deal signed before they find out what that other hand feels like. That was the American story. Dramatic, significant, historic. Here is the part nobody is telling you. While those 3 destroyers were absorbing the world's attention, Iran was simultaneously launching a fresh wave of missiles and drones into the UAE, again. The UAE's air defenses activated on May 7th, specifically because Iran attacked Gulf partner territory at the same moment it was attacking U.S. warships. 4 missile alerts were issued to UAE residents in a single day. Shelter, 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 shelter. Meanwhile, CNN reporters in Dubai were filing dispatches about the American destroyers, and in those same dispatches, almost as a footnote, mentioning that UAE had also been targeted. Almost as a footnote. Ask yourself something honestly. If France had absorbed 537 ballistic missile strikes over 10 weeks, would it be a footnote in any story? If Australia had 2,256 drone attacks on its cities, would the world be treating it as background noise? The UAE sits in the geographic middle of this entire crisis. It is being hit by one side, it is hosting the military infrastructure of the other side, and somehow the conversation keeps sailing right past it. The Fujairah Petroleum Industry Zone was struck earlier this month. Fujairah is critical for a specific reason. It sits outside the strait on the Gulf of Oman coast. It is the UAE's pipeline terminus, the exact facility the UAE built specifically to bypass Iranian pressure on Hormuz. Iran hit it anyway. A fire broke out. 3 Indian nationals were injured in that strike. An Egyptian national was killed at a nearby gas facility in Habshan when interceptor debris came down after a successful intercept. That is what a successful defense looks like in the UAE right now. You shoot the missile down and the debris still kills someone. 13 people dead. Most of them were not Emirati citizens. They were migrant workers, Indian nationals, Bangladeshi nationals, an Egyptian worker. People who came to the UAE for an income, for an opportunity, for a better life. They are not in any headline. Here is something worth pausing on. The UAE never chose this conflict. In the weeks before the war started in late February, Oman was mediating indirect talks between Washington and Tehran. UAE officials were publicly supporting diplomacy. The UAE had actually recalled its ambassador to Israel in early 2026, a signal of how uncomfortable Gulf states were with the trajectory of events. The Gulf states did not want this confrontation. That quote is from Al Jazeera's own reporting, sourced from regional analysts in early March. And yet those same Gulf states are the ones being bombed. Saudi Arabia got hit, Riyadh got hit, Bahrain got hit, Kuwait's airport was struck, Dubai's skyline saw missile impacts. And these are countries that explicitly wanted the war to not happen. They were the mediators. They were the quiet diplomats. They woke up to air raid sirens anyway. Comment down below. Do you think the international media is giving this conflict fair coverage, or is the UAE's experience being buried under the superpower narrative? I want to know what you think, because this is the question that cuts through everything else. Now here is where it gets even more layered, because on May 7th, something else activated alongside the American directed energy systems and the Aegis destroyers. Israeli air defense systems, deployed inside the UAE, were involved in intercepting Iranian missiles targeting Emirati territory. CNN confirmed this from a source familiar with the matter. Think about what that means diplomatically. The UAE, which had recalled its ambassador to Israel just months earlier, is now relying on Israeli defense technology positioned on its own soil to survive an Iranian barrage. Every political calculation the UAE had tried to make, every careful balancing act between U.S. alignment and regional relationships, compressed into one military reality. You protect your cities with what works. And what works right now is American Patriot systems, American THAAD batteries, and Israeli interception technology. Meanwhile, Iran established something this week that deserves significantly more attention than it has received. A new Iranian government agency called the Persian Gulf Strait Authority was quietly announced. It sent formal emails to shipping companies, including to Lloyd's List Intelligence, the global shipping data firm. The emails contained application forms. Ships wanting to transit the Strait of Hormuz now had to formally apply to an Iranian government agency for permission and pay what Iran called fees. Iran is not just blockading the strait. Iran is trying to institutionalize control over it, to make itself the permanent toll collector of the world's most critical oil passage. 20% of the world's daily oil supply moves through Hormuz. That is not a small number. That is 1 in 5 barrels of oil the world burns every single day. European countries, Asian economies, South Korea, Japan, India, all of them connected to that single 21-mile-wide bottleneck. And now there is an Iranian government agency with an application form deciding who gets through. Brent crude did something interesting this week despite all of this. It declined, not spiked, declined. Markets are reading the American military performance, the successful transit, the directed energy weapons eliminating the drone swarm threat, and concluding that Hormuz is more likely to open than to close permanently. The alternative pipelines also matter here. The UAE activated its Fujairah pipeline at full capacity weeks ago, routing oil overland and bypassing the strait entirely. Saudi Arabia's Petroline moves 5 to 7 million barrels daily to the Red Sea independently of Hormuz. The market has decided the pressure is finite, but the UAE's civilian population cannot pipeline its way out of missile alerts. Stay with me for one more minute because this is the part that reframes the entire next phase of this conflict. The Bahrain government this week formally requested a UN Security Council session specifically about Iranian attacks on the UAE. In that session, the UAE ambassador Mohammed Abu Shahab stood before the council and said something that should have stopped the world. He said this was not an isolated incident. He said the UAE has intercepted over 500 ballistic missiles, nearly 30 cruise missiles, and more than 2,000 UAVs launched from Iran. And then he said something that cuts directly to the global stakes of this story. What happens in the Strait of Hormuz does not stay in the Strait of Hormuz. It affects energy markets, supply chains, food prices, and economic stability across the globe. China and Russia vetoed a Gulf Cooperation Council draft resolution in the Security Council that would have formally condemned Iran. 11 council members voted yes. China and Russia said no. The veto was cast. The resolution that the UAE and Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and Qatar all needed, the formal international legal condemnation that would have given them documented backing, was killed by geopolitics. 2 permanent members protected the state that is firing missiles into their neighbors' cities. The UAE is now building its own legal case. A formal national committee has been established specifically to document Iranian acts of aggression and their damages. Every missile strike, every drone attack, every dead worker, every oil facility fire, documented, cataloged, and assembled for whatever legal and diplomatic framework eventually processes this conflict. The UAE is not just absorbing the hits. It is preparing to pursue consequences through every channel available to it. And here is the open question that should keep you watching every update from this conflict closely. Because the answer determines what happens next, not just militarily, but economically for the whole world. Iran's nihilistic faction, the hardline IRGC commanders who are driving the military escalation from deep bunkers, announced weeks ago that a deal is far removed from reality. They coordinated May 7th's attack on the American destroyers. They targeted the UAE simultaneously, and they watched their ports burn while 3 American destroyers sailed through with 0 damage. The directed energy weapons alone changed the strategic math permanently. A laser that fires at the cost of electricity has an infinite magazine. Iran's drone swarm, which cost $20,000 to $30,000 per unit to produce, is now just expensive target practice for a beam of light. The entire economic logic of the attrition strategy, the plan to overwhelm American interceptors until the costs became politically unsustainable, dissolved the moment the HELIOS and ODIN systems demonstrated they work under real combat conditions. Pakistan is still mediating. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif this week described his country as being in continuous contact with both Iran and the United States, day and night, to stop the war. Pakistani Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar spoke directly with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi this week. The diplomatic thread is still alive. Tehran said it is reviewing the latest American proposals. There is still a table. But the love tap message from the American side, and the Bahrain-requested UN Security Council session, and the UAE's documentation committee, and the fresh missile alerts in Dubai this week, all of it is happening simultaneously in the same 72-hour window. The world is watching 3 American warships, 3 destroyers that absorbed everything Iran could throw at them and came through clean, protected by laser systems that belong to science fiction, and an Aegis combat architecture that tracked over 100 simultaneous threats and eliminated them in order of priority. Nobody is watching the 10 million people who live in the geography where this is all playing out. The UAE government is not asking for sympathy. It is asking for the Security Council to enforce its own resolution. It is asking for the legal instruments of the international system to function the way they were designed to function.
It is building its documentation committee because it knows the political winds will eventually shift, and it wants the evidence ready. It is hosting American military infrastructure and Israeli air defense systems and running oil through bypass pipelines while its cities absorb drone swarms and its schoolchildren sit at home in front of laptops because stepping outside carries risk. That is the story underneath the story. That is what May 7th actually looks like when you stop watching only the warships and start watching the geography they are sailing through. If this kind of verified, sourced, ground-level analysis is what you want from the news, subscribe to Verified Bulletin right now. We do not repeat headlines, we track what the headlines are missing. Like this video if the UAE angle was something you had not considered before, because the algorithm buries this channel unless you help surface it. And drop your take in the comments below. Do you think the international response to Iran's attacks on Gulf states has been adequate? Or has the superpower narrative completely swallowed what is happening to the countries in the middle? The next 72 hours in this conflict are going to answer questions that have been building for 2 months. The hardline faction inside Iran is making its next decision right now. The diplomatic track through Pakistan is still moving. The F-35s are on the ramp. The lasers are charged, and somewhere in the UAE, a family is wondering whether tomorrow's missile alert will come before or after school starts. Keep watching Verified Bulletin, because we will be here for every update.